All right, well, hello, everyone. Hello. I'm not going to say good morning and make you guys say it 500 times like people before me this morning. Don't heckle. Welcome back. I feel like it's been a few weeks since we have been in this building as a church family, and it's good to be back here with everyone celebrating our Lord and Savior. Whoa. Did I lose? There we go. So just a few things before I get started this morning. For everyone who provided Aaron and I meals for the last few weeks, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you. I haven't had to cook in a month, and it's just been so awesome. And we really appreciate it. Also, just a quick personal announcement. I'm having a fundraiser August 25th. Details are on Facebook, and I'll explain more at a more appropriate time. But just keep August 25th in mind. And now it's story time. I've got a story for you guys today, and this story kind of starts, it started in November, but I'm going to start the story in April and May. If you haven't heard, if you are a visitor here and have blocked yourself from Facebook and Instagram, then you might not have heard that Erin and I had our baby. If we can get that picture, there she is. If she does not grow up to be a musician after that picture, she swerved really hard from her destiny. And yes, that's my guitar. That took a lot of work to get that picture. Credit to our friend Holly, a photographer from Rosenort. Yes, but we had our baby, and especially at Psalmify every week, I would tell the few people that come all the funny things that kind of happened during the pregnancy. And before I continue, I just want to preface by saying that I have permission from Erin to rib on her a little bit, and everything I'm about to say has been cleared by her wherever she went. Erin? Oh, she's in the back talking. She's given me permission, trust that. It's April and May, it's spring, and she's finally adopted the penguin waddle, I call it. I'm going to feel tension in this room as I go, I know it. But I never laughed at her, I never made fun of her. I would just watch her and admire and just watch in awe at this thing that God is doing in my wife. And of course, I think it's adorable, right? And she's like, stop laughing. She keeps telling me to stop laughing at her, but I'm not laughing at her. I'm admiring, not the comedy of the situation, but I'm just admiring this whole thing. Because there's so few seasons in my life I get to witness something like this. And I think it was beginning of June. We were going to a wedding, and Erin puts on this dress. And she puts on the dress, and I feel like sitcoms and movie comedies have framed this question to be a dangerous question, but she puts this dress on and asks, "How do I look?" And I know better, but I don't necessarily play it 100% safe. I just said, "You look delightfully pregnant." Am I feeling tension yet? But let me explain, because this can be dissected, in 50-50. Pregnancy is a fact. She was 8 months pregnant. You can't take that away. And when I looked at her, I felt delighted. I felt joy, delightfully pregnant. If you still have a problem with that, I think there's going to be a lineup starting right there. You can come scold me later. But, I had this attitude, I had this humor, and this upbeatness about it, because everything had gone pretty smoothly. And then kind of, end of June, early July, the hip pain started to get more seriously, and, things started getting less funny. And it was July 2nd, and I had a tea time here in Morris with my friend Les. And I just as I'm about to leave, I tell Erin, if you go into labor, I'm not looking at my phone, so just don't. And wouldn't you know it, that was not when she went into labor. Golfing went fine, but then, Erin was in a lot of pain. And so it's 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, and I get that direct line with the baby, and I tell her, listen, you're hurting your mother. We really want to meet you, just get out. And message was received, and 6 hours later, the water broke. Now, fortunately, we had packed our bags just a few days before, so in theory, all we had to do that morning at 5:30 in the morning was grab the bag, get dressed, click the car seat in, and hit the road. But the next 18, 19 hours, Erin and I have playfully dubbed as a series of unfortunate events. We get into the SUV, fire it up, an eighth of a tank of gas. I had neglected to fill it up at all during the weekend. So now it is 10 to 6 in the morning, and I'm driving 2 streets over to my parents' place so I can steal their key to the key lot in town. Now, some of you may think that's early, but for my dad, he's already had breakfast. He's already watched the news. He's been up for a while already. So it wasn't a pain that I showed up at 10 to 6 in the morning to harass him for his key. And so, fill up the SUV, hit the road. And we're on 14, and that's when we realized we neglected to have any sort of breakfast. And so, of course, with Aaron's consent, we had agreed we would go to the McDonald's drive-thru for breakfast before we're subscribed to hospital food for who knows how long. So again, total agreement. We're both on the same page on this. It wasn't just my idea, although it was my idea to present it. So we get to the drive-thru, 2 cars pulling right behind us immediately. We get to the intercom. I say, "Good morning. We're only serving muffins and breakfast burritos." Who wants a muffin or a breakfast burrito? I want my McGriddle. Erin wants her bacon biscuit. So it was just like, no thanks, we'll pass. But there's already 2 cars behind us and 3 cars ahead of us. So we still had to go through the drive-thru, waiting for nothing. So we go to get Tim's, and Tim's is good, but it's not what you want when you want McDonald's. So then we get to the hospital. We get to that registration desk, and they ask for Erin's health card. And in that moment, we realize that Erin forgot her purse and wallet at home. And this is slowly starting to turn into, one of those dramatic comedies, right? Like, you're rushing that. I mean, Erin wasn't screaming in labor like that, but it's just, it's like, we can't let you in unless you fill this paperwork out sort of thing. And we knew we did our paperwork. We did the hospital tour. Just let us in. And eventually they did without too much fuss, and everything ended up being okay. So we get to our room at about 8 o'clock in the morning. And again, permission to say all these things. Things didn't go so well after we get to our room. 5 hours later, our nurses and doctors decided to induce Erin. And what happened with the induction is it threw Erin into relentless contractions without rest. And Erin's plan going into this was to go as pain-free as possible, or pain medication-free as possible. And finally, at about 5 o'clock p.m., so from 8 o'clock when we get to the hospital till 5 o'clock, she went just with Tylenol. And so she requested morphine. The pain was still too great, so she requested to have an epidural. And, the epidural was great. It finally gave her rest. It sprained my left ring finger when she was hanging onto my hand. But it gave Erin the rest that she needed. Yeah, I know. My feet are killing me, right? You get to lie down all day. I'm standing here. Is it light up forming yet? I don't know. Thank you for that, because I'm getting there. Because, Erin's finally getting rest, and I get to finally have my own kind of rest, because I'm the kind of person who hates to see people in pain, and I like to replace that pain with joy and humor, and I felt completely disarmed because I didn't feel like comedy was a welcome presence in this room, and I couldn't take her pain away. And now I know that I wasn't useless in that room, but for my primary hardwiring, I felt useless because I wasn't taking her pain away, and I wasn't making her feel better. And so Erin's finally getting some rest. And, they're monitoring her, they're monitoring the baby, and they noticed that, during contractions, the baby's heart rate would drop from about 120, 130, where they like to see it, to about 80. And this happened, at least from what I witnessed, about a half a dozen times. And, so they called the doctor, and the doctor listened to the nurses, read the charts, and immediately made the decision to have a C-section. And I'm so thankful that our doctor didn't play games with us. But the C-section wasn't scary in the sense that it was major surgery. I had, this whole time, and since, maybe a little season before my baptism, I don't think my faith will ever be shaken. So I'm in this hospital room the whole time thinking, God brought us here. God hasn't let me down. God won't not show up. God always shows up. And so there's a reason why things weren't working the way they were all day and all afternoon and all evening, and now there's a reason why we're having a C-section. So I wasn't worried in the sense that, oh, we're having a C-section. I knew that the road ahead would be tough for Erin for recovery, and that's not what you want. And so, the C-section is called, the team gets assembled, our whole room changes, and I'm dressed and I'm scrubbed up to go wait in the hallway of the OR to be there for the delivery of my baby. And it's 11 o'clock, and I know this because the only thing that I can look at in this hallway that makes sense is a big old clock. It's 11 o'clock. I'm just standing there, just praying. Again, not that I'm concerned that, Macy was going to be delivered unhealthy or something. It's just, I'm praying for the team. But it's 11:05, it's 11:10, it's 11:15. And I'm not a medical expert by any means, but part of me felt like something's not right. Like, this is taking too long, but again, I have faith that everything's going to work out fine. Finally, about 11:20, one of the surgery team nurses came out and said that Erin's epidural wasn't working properly. She wasn't freezing correctly. She was feeling what was happening. We have to put her to sleep. You have to be escorted out. And so as I'm being escorted out of the room, Erin's mom makes her way onto the ward, and she sees someone dressed in surgery clothes leaving a room. You think there's news, and I had to tell her there was no news. So we go back to our room and wait, and it was about 25 minutes later when a nurse pokes her head into our room, and she says, "You've had your baby, would you like to see her?" And I get escorted to the nursery, and this is going to sound bad. Don't be, the lineup hasn't formed yet. Please don't start. But I get into the nursery and I see a baby on a table. It doesn't register that that's my daughter. In that moment, all I saw was a baby on a table. And there were 3 nurses huddled around, doing their tests, cleaning her up, washing her hair, because she had a ton of hair and there was stuff stuck in there. But in that moment, it was just any other garden variety baby to me at that moment. And then they wrapped her up and said, "Congratulations, here's your daughter." And I got to clutch my daughter in my hands to my chest for the first time. And in that single moment, I felt an extremely overwhelming combination of emotions that absolutely broke me down to my core. Of course, some of the obvious emotions felt were relief that, my baby's healthy and that Erin's okay. And joy that, this journey, one journey is ended and another has begun. But I had felt this ancient weight. You're wearing a 20-pound backpack for 20 years. You forget that you're wearing a backpack. I have tattoos. I forget I have tattoos sometimes. I look at my arm. What's that black mark? Oh, it's me. You forget it's there. And so they passed me my daughter, and this burden that fell off of me was the burden of the fact and the thought that at one point in time, I didn't feel like I deserved a daughter. I didn't feel like I deserved a daughter at one point in my life. And I buried it deep down, and I covered it with humor for so long that I forgot it was there. And these feelings started from when I was a late teenager, 18, 19, and continuing from every relationship I had had prior to Erin. When I finally made a commitment to God, I'm not going to chase relationships and friendships with women unless there was a spiritual connection, because everything I had done before was all about a physical connection. Some of those relationships would be 2 years, some of those relationships, hours. And so when I finally had this reckoning with God that I would find who He wants for me, there was this other part of me that didn't want to accept that, God's forgiveness for that part of my life, and I buried it, and I covered it with humor. I would say things like, boys, right, just toss them a baseball and they'll be fine. Just, stupid little things like that. But I knew somewhere deep down it would be easier to raise a young man not to do the things I had done than to be a father of a daughter who had just been a victim of the kind of person I once was. I felt like I didn't deserve a daughter, and honestly, I don't deserve anything. When we think about grace in a bigger picture, grace is undeserved. I didn't deserve a daughter. God owes me nothing. Jesus died on the cross. God sent His Son to die on a cross for me. What more do I need? I didn't deserve that anyway. But what more could I even ask for? What is within me to ask God to give me more things? I didn't think there was. Romans 5, verses 6 and 8 is a perfect illustration of this. I'm reading from the ESV version. For while we were still weak, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. While we were still weak, Christ died for the ungodly. It doesn't say that while we were figuring things out, Christ died for us. It doesn't say while we had figured it out, Christ died for us. It didn't say while we were at our best, Christ died for us. While we were still weak, God shows his love for us, and that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Like I pointed out earlier, I have a faith that I don't think can be shaken. Whether it means that, I go to school, I go to college when I have a mortgage and financially doesn't make sense, or just other milestones in my life. A lot of the things that God has called me to do, I've been faithful to, and it never makes sense, but I've always made it to the other side of that stronger. But grace and, I don't know what's worse, having faith and not understanding what grace means, or not even having faith. For me, an example came to my mind as I was writing this. It's like winning backstage passes to a concert of your favorite musician, and you just go to the show. It may be the best show you've ever seen in your life. It may be something you've wanted to see forever. Maybe it's a reunion tour if you like some of those 70s, 80s, bands. But you skip the meet and greet. God gave us this gift of life and love, but he also gives us more. And are we going to embrace more? Are we going to accept those backstage passes, go to the meet and greet, get whatever gifts they want to give us? Jesus didn't die on a cross only for a moment. He didn't die on a cross for a momentary action. God didn't sacrifice his son just to set us free and wash his hands and be done of us. Another beautiful illustration, Ephesians 2. And Ephesians 2 starts with a narrative of how we were dead to our sins and how we chase the desires of our flesh. Verse 4 starts with, but God. You're bad, you're sinners, you do this. But God, being rich in mercy because of his great love which he loved us, even when we were dead in our trespasses, made us alive together in Christ. By grace you have been saved. Even when we were dead, by grace you have been saved. It is the gift of God, not results of works, so that no one may boast. It is the gift. It's the only gift God gives us, and it's the only gift we need. What more do we need than God's grace? So, if we could show the next picture. So, held in my hands, clutched to my chest was my gift from God. In no way had I deserved it. No way had I earned it. There was no Herculean gauntlet of challenges, no Hydra to slay to receive this bundle of joy. It was just a beautiful gift from God. It's something that once again teaches me that I keep putting God in a box. God's grace displayed through the gift of my daughter has shined a light into every crevice of my being and has exposed areas of weaknesses in my life. And one of those weaknesses is I have confidence issues. I've been meeting with Jason for over a year and a half. Our worship team has been meeting with a vocal coach, and I have confidence issues. And I band-aid those issues by practicing 4 times a week. If I introduce a new song to you guys, I practice it for 4 weeks, 4 times a day before I even bring it to the stage. I rehearse thoroughly so that I don't embarrass myself up here. I've told you personal stories, I've told you embarrassing stories that I have owned, but I do not desire new opportunities to embarrass myself. And I feel like God shining this light in my life will allow me to properly address all of my areas of weaknesses in my life. I know this is a very personal story today. This is a story of mine and Aaron's journey. But I hope that what has been revealed to me through the last month means something to you guys. I don't want you guys, that's why I spent 8 years at the drop-in. I don't want anyone to fall into the pitfalls I do, And I want you guys to climb out of any pitfalls you're already in. Don't underestimate the power of God's love and grace. Because when you do that, you unintentionally create a distance. And like I described, you put yourself in a box. You separate yourself from God's love. And God did not send his son to die on a cross for us to separate ourselves from him. Not only did God intend to save us, his intentions are to show us his glory in so many crazy ways. I have a challenge for you guys this week, and I want you to take it seriously because it has changed my life. The challenge isn't, go have a child. It's how God showed his grace to me. But take some time. Have some quiet time with God. Have some prayer time with God. However you meditate in the Word and in the Scripture and in the Spirit, take that time. Let God and his grace and glory invade every bit of yourself. Let God take care of your burdens and your pain. And just walk in God's grace every day. I'd like to call the band back up as I close in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, I don't want anyone here to ever underestimate the act that took place on that cross. It is my prayer that nobody here underestimates your love and grace, but that they walk in your grace and love every day, that they allow your grace to shine through, and that they receive your grace every day. And Father, for me personally, I thank you for giving me a daughter. I always joke that you do things in my life the hard way, but I always need that challenge. I always need that humbling. So God, thank you for my little family, and I thank you for my church family as we raise this daughter, not only as the Godard family, but as a church family as well.